Welcome to the GCI conference. Thank you. Please stand by. You will now be placed into conference. There are 21 participants in the conference.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, are you online? Okay. Ms. Craig, are you online?
Yes, sir, and I am recording now.
You are recording. Okay. Then I'm going to call the meeting of the Marijuana Control Board on Wednesday, April 15th, 2020 to order. And note that all members of the board are present. Carrie Craig and Executive Director Clint are online as well. There may be a lot of other public online. So I'll constitute that as the roll call. One change to the agenda is the attorney has requested an executive session. She estimates it could take 15 to 20 minutes. So right after we approve the agenda, we will go into executive session. The director has sent out the email to you that will give you the password for the executive session. Ms. Wilson, are you online yet?
I am, sir.
Okay. With that change to the agenda, is there any other changes requested for the agenda? Okay. I will consider that the agenda is then approved. One other note, sometime this morning, after I went into my 9:30 meeting, the attorney also sent us out a revised finding of emergency statement. So make sure you have that available. With that, I need a motion to go into executive session to confer with our attorney on legal issues facing the board.
Guilty. So,
That, Bruce, you made the motion?
yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any objections? Okay, so we will disconnect from this call and call into the executive session. We'll start just as soon as we can get everybody back online. Thanks. And to the public, we should be about 20 minutes. Thank you. Bye.
Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Thank you. Please stand by. You will now be placed into conference. There are 26 participants in the conference.
Hear me?
Okay, I can now. Mr. Heine,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Schulte,
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Deshak,
Yes, I'm here.
okay, Ms. Wilson, Mr. Klinkhart,
Yes.
Ms. Craig,
Yes, and we are recording.
okay,
And
and
this
Ms.
is,
Wilson, are you back online?
I am, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we are out of executive session. We've had our advice from our attorney, and it is now time for us to move forward with the business today. A couple of points I want to bring up is that the staff and the attorney have an ABC board meeting, alcohol beverage control board meeting at 2 o'clock. So I would like to finish up whatever we're doing by 1 o'clock, giving them a time for a break and to get set up. Also, we were sent out this morning a new revised finding of emergency. We also received, I believe, yesterday, an advisory draft from staff related to how we might advise the industry on travel issues, and then we have the revised actual emergency regulations. The attorney has asked that we try to review this in whole so that she can make whatever revisions that she needs to make, draft a letter to communicate to the governor's office, and that she will then come back with a final revision that we can approve at a meeting yet to be set, hopefully sometime later on this week yet. With that, Ms. Wilson, where do you suggest we start in our brainstorming and trying to give you information so that you can make the adjustments necessary?
I suggest you start with the finding of emergency, if you have time to look at the document submitted this morning.
Okay. Okay, so...
You need to take your
Yeah.
comments. Yeah.
Okay.
So we should be looking at the one entitled final consideration?
No, this should be the one that says Marijuana Control Board finds that emergency exists. Number 1 says many marijuana establishment licensees governed under AS 1738 and 3A 6306 are permitted to operate.
Mr. Chairman?
And that was emailed out this morning.
Mr. Chairman, Director Klinkhart?
Yes.
And I think the title, if you're looking at it, that was sent is COVID-19 Finding of Emergency, Marijuana Control Board 041520. Should be the latest one. Thank you.
Okay.
So the one that says final consideration is not the latest one?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll never use those words again until it's really fun.
Okay. I'm half German. I'm very literal.
I am too. So. Fritz Hart, though, is Irish, so you have to take that into account.
Right. Okay, so I will give people time to take a quick read and compare with the other document. My initial read is I like the way it's written, and I think it gets to some of the points that we want to make sure that people understand that we have the statutory authority to make these changes. So
And
Are there any
I hope,
particular questions? Ms. Wilson?
well, I also hope it addresses Lieutenant Jaime's concern that, you know, a no vote doesn't mean that anyone's denying that we are in a pandemic. And it focuses more on the emergency of social distancing in stores and carrier issues.
It absolutely does.
Okay.
So they're going to have to work.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Mr. Jaime?
Number 4, I find it kind of difficult. I find it difficult, not kind of. I find it difficult that we're comparing the marijuana business to the retail grocery stores as far as providing curbside pickup. They were doing this long before the COVID-19 pandemic started. Marijuana and food are not even in the same category. So, those are my concerns with this document.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Wilson?
the request I received for emergency findings to withstand review is to make them as fact-specific as possible. And what I was trying to state is that I understand what the Lieutenant is saying, is that we are learning from what the retail stores are doing. And while curbside delivery was always available, I believe patrons of grocery stores have been more likely to use that route because of their concern about entering stores. And from what I heard last week, patrons of retail marijuana stores have the same concern as well. So I agree completely that marijuana and food are differently, and I can try to rewrite this so as not to make a comparison. But I did want to provide something to say that we're learning from what other industries are doing.
Through the chair.
Mr. Jaime?
Yeah, Ms. Wilson, I do appreciate, you attempting to, or wanting to change the document for me. I don't really see the need for that. I brought that up because it concerns me. I can tell you right now I'm going to vote no on this document just because I don't believe that a lot of stuff should be changed right now. So I don't think that the board as a whole should have to waste time for my concern. I'm going to vote no regardless of the wording. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on the revised finding of emergency? Okay, I'm going to go down the list. Mr. Deshak, do you have any particular comments or questions?
I do not.
You do not? Okay, Mr. Schulte?
I do not have any concerns.
Mr. Miller?
None.
Okay, and I don't really either. I agree with Mr. Jaime about the comparison of the grocery stores. If that could be reworded to industries similar in providing, retail service have done X, might be good. But something along the lines that compares and learns, but not necessarily as direct as this reads. And I think that would be fine. So are there any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I
Wilson?
do think paragraph 7 will be a work of art depending on what you put in regulations and what you put in policy changes. So just know I can adjust that paragraph based on what the board does.
Okay. Okay, so not hearing any other comments, I am going to just make a decision that the board is comfortable with the revised one, and I'm going to just put a date on here of 4/15/2020 in my notes, and the attorney can make changes to 3 and 4 and then look at 7 based on our next step. So done with that, do we want, I'd ask the attorney again, should we look at the regulation 995 has been revised, or do you want us to look more at the advisory draft that staff has sent out?
Why don't we start with the advisory draft and see if the board is comfortable going with that, and if they're not, then we'll put changes in regulation.
Okay. So what we're going to look at is an advisory draft, the date April 14th, 2020, Marijuana Control Board policy on enforcement of 3 AAC 306750 transportation. Mr. Klinkard, do you want to sort of describe what you have written here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, this was put together based on our last conversation to try and clarify as opposed to just change. For example, number 1, 3AC 306750A, to be more specific, to say, if I can try to summarize that as long as we're dealing with 2 people who have their handler permit and that the handoff is documented, so from point A to point B, if there's a change, it needs to be documented. Again, trying to come up with a way that says that, we're limiting the contact people have in public areas. But it also says that and makes it clear that the licensee is doing so at their own risk if there's a problem with it, and we understand that. The second one is the same thing, having to do with make sure that everything is secured, it's sealed, that you're going from point A to point B, trying not to make any unnecessary stops, but we're saying that we're interpreting it that there may be issues that come up overnight, but it still needs to be very clearly kept, monitored. I mean, it's almost, it doesn't say specifically, but I envision, like in television, when you've got a handcuff attached to it, and that you have to be responsible for that. Take a look. If there's any questions, I will be more happy to try and answer, as I'm sure also Ms. Wilson will. Over.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? Mr. Miller, do you have any questions?
I don't. I think is exactly what we discussed at our last meeting, so I don't have any questions.
Okay. And this draft sort of reaches some of your concerns or issues sufficiently?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. Mr. Schulte, same questions.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as written. Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Mr. Heine.
Through the chair, I do have just a technical question for you. Are we going to vote on this document like individually for 75A versus 750D, or is this voted on as a whole?
We can do whatever the board wants. I just wanted now to see if there were questions or concerns or anything that people wanted to do.
Okay, I do appreciate the explanation. I would like to vote on these separately. The concerns I had last week, some were addressed and some weren't. I don't want to rehash the same discussion or argument that I had last week, but if we can separate these 2 issues, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Okay. Mr. Deshak, do you have any questions or concerns at this point?
Yeah, just in general, just so I've got clarification, what I'm looking at is, so the new emergency regulation, correct? 3 AAC 306, and this is all of the new wording?
No, this would be, we were looking at the advisory draft. It was an email that was sent out by Mr. Klinkard on April 14th. And it's titled Advisory Draft, and it talks public testimony. And it talks about 3 AAC 306750 transportation. Do you have that, Mr. Deshak?
I do have that one. Okay. So
okay, that's the one we're talking about right now.
Yeah, no, with this package, it's fine. I will. One of the things between the numerous documents, I think that there will be another time for me to talk about it, was the transportation, the planning of the transportation. So if you're going to transport something, whether or not your stops need to be listed prior to leaving, or whether or not, because now what sort of enforcement happens after that if your stop's not exactly where you say that you're going to stop, etc. That's my own concern. It might not be necessarily said on this document, but in other documents, that's a sticking point that I came up with.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Klinkart, can you answer that? Or Ms. Wilson?
it does say all overnight stops must be planned and documented in the transport manifest accompanying the marijuana or marijuana product and in the marijuana inventory tracking system. We could say pre-planned if that makes it easier, clearer.
I think maybe we'll just have to make sure that we think about the specificity of, do you have to say the address? Do you have to say the community? Do you have to say the borough? Within 50-mile radius, because there's a lot of things that could come up, and then that just becomes onerous again if something comes up during the middle of the day.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Schulte, I have another question.
Mr. Schulte.
Yeah, just, this kind of goes back to a discussion we had, some public comment we got at a previous meeting. If all of this information is placed in metric, including where and when a person's going to be overnighting, is that, who is that visible to? Is it only visible to AMCO, or do others have access to it? I'm a little concerned at the security aspect of this.
Mr. Klinkart?
I hope so. There was some conversations I had with James about some of those sort of things, and some of it was being handled. There was discussions with Metric. If James is on and can talk specifically to where we are today, that might be helpful. The other thing I'd like to add through the chair is, do we want to also address in this point what I call the emergency? Something happens, you get somewhere and your plan changes and you have to be there overnight. I would, if the board is okay with it, I think there needs to be a way for them to contact AMCO for something that is an emergency. So that certainly that's a consideration I'd like to hear. Over.
Okay. Mr. Holscher, are you online? Doesn't appear so. Okay. Okay, so I don't hear any more questions, issues.
This is Mr. Miller, the chair.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
I would like to point out on the manifest today, when we're doing transports, if we have one of those emergencies come up, you can do it by phone. I prefer not to because I can't type very well, but you can update your manifest en route and note it properly. So I think the mechanisms already exist that we do that today. That's for Mr. Dushock.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Jaime.
I said I want to rehash the argument from last week, but I just have to bring up one more time. When it comes to 750D, I still think this wording is ambiguous, and I'm not saying it promotes robbery, but if these individuals or these transporters are staying in hotels or people's houses and they're not in secured facilities, such as a marijuana retail shop, I think it's dangerous. There's a public safety issue by doing this. I do not agree with this regulation at all. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Hearing that and the desire by Mr. Jaime to break this question into two, I would entertain a motion that the board accepts the advisory draft presented by staff related to number 1, 3AAC 306-750A. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Schulte.
Motion by Bruce.
And
Is there any? Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. So on the vote, Mr. Dushock.
Yes.
Mr. Jaime.
And this vote is to separate, correct?
Yes, this is just on number 1A.
Yes.
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The number 2 on this draft is 3AAC 306750D. And do I have a motion on that?
Move to accept.
Okay, Mr. Schulte? Second?
Second.
Mr. Miller. Is there any discussion? Okay, call for the question. Mr. DeShock?
Yeah, just sorry for being late on this one.
Sure.
As we're voting here, we're voting to accept the findings of this document. This isn't passing a regulation or not.
No, this is an advisory that the office will put up on the website to inform the marijuana industry that during this emergency, this will be the interpretation that staff will use in regulating transportation.
Okay, thank you. And we are voting specifically on 750D.
D, yes, as in Delta. So your vote?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Heine?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. So that means both portions of this have passed. I think that this should get cleaned up a little bit before it gets actually put up on the website and run by the attorney one more time. And if the director would just let the board know the link to that when it gets put up on the website, I would appreciate it. That way we'll have the information that and what it looks like going out. Is that okay with Mr. Klinkhart?
Yes, we'll do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Schulte?
Just not to belabor the point, but having voted in favor of this, I would just reiterate that I think there was legitimate concern that too many people had access to the itinerary in metric. So I guess I would like to see that locked down as much as possible. If the recipient, for example, has no need to know this information, I would like to see that made obscured to them in metric and keep the people in the know to an absolute minimum for safety.
Thank you. I don't know, maybe Mr. Miller knows, but it was my understanding, and I have not gone through any metric training. I'm not approved to do any metric. But when say a cultivator is shipping documents, they do the manifest. That manifest is given to whoever's carrying it, and it's accessible from that cultivator. It's not accessible to the person it's going to until they get it, and then they have a way to link so that they accept that transfer, and then that goes on their books and off the cultivator's books until the next stop, the manufacturer, the retail accepts that product. It still belongs to the cultivator. The cultivator has 10 people that have access to his metric, then he has 10 people that would be able to see it. If he restricts it, then that's it. But so I don't know, maybe Mr. Miller has a better explanation, but I think that's how it works today.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
This is Director Klinkhart through the chair. I just,
yes.
One of the enforcement folks did just give me some information that, of course, enforcement has access, as does revenue, but it's the information is that nobody else can see all of it. Over.
Okay. But your concern, Mr. Schulte, is taken it. And I think everybody wants the transporter to be safe, and everybody wants everybody to be safe. And so far, I don't think we've had any problems per se, that I know of anyway. But Okay, so it is 11:45, and like I said, I'd like to be done by 1. So let's move on to the emergency regulations.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question.
Yes, Ms. Wilson.
I know both passed, but would you like this broken into 2 advisories since there were 2 different votes, or kept as one?
I think they should go out as 2 separate advisories. I think they deal with 2 different issues.
Very good.
I don't know if that's because of the vote. I just think it's more the subject. And, you know, if we have problems with one, we don't have to sort of change both.
Makes sense.
Okay, so on to the, Mr. Miller.
Chair. I'm sorry, just for one clarification, because I just looked. If I have a transfer coming into me, and let's say it has multiple stops and stuff, I can see the travel route on that manifest. And people who work, so the receivers can see that. So.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
I'm looking at one now, and I can see it, so I wasn't 100% positive, so I wanted to log in and look.
Okay. So I think the concern of Mr. Jaime and Mr. Schulte that the industry has to find a way to restrict that information and keep everybody in this supply chain safe. Okay, so emergency regulations, the 3 AAC 306-995, the attorney made some changes to this. So let's deal with the first section A, the following activities are permitted, and this is about the curbside pickup. And I think the major change was adding a D. So is there any additional questions? Are there any concerns on portion A of this regulation?
Through the chair, Mr. Jaime, which document are we looking at? I can't seem to find it.
It's the emergency regulations. It was sent out, is it sent out the same time as the finding of emergency changes, or no? This was out differently.
I think I sent them out on Saturday when I was
on Saturday?
Yeah. I'm actually looking for mine too as you're talking.
And it's
the one that I have was today at 9:09 a.m. with three
no, not
attachments.
not the finding of emergency. This is the actual regulation.
Right, and the email that I have has 3 attachments. Maybe that's just.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
no, that's just the way Google presents it to me.
Yeah, this is the one on Saturday, and it has up at the top emergency regulations, and it says register blank blank 20 blank commerce, community, and economic development. And it says 3 AAC 306 is amended by adding a new section to read. So does everybody have that document?
Yep.
And I think it's called 4 Draft MCB COVID-19 Emergency.
Yes, I found it. Thank you,
Okay.
Jaime.
Okay. And so there was a change to A, and it's basically adding a large D. Says licensee submits and fees will be waived, and the director approves a temporary operating plan. So I wanted to make sure that we were aware of who was going to offer curbside, that they had a plan, and that we had reviewed that plan. I didn't want them to have to pay a fee, so that works for me. Is there any other concerns or changes that we would like to talk to the attorney about for 3 AAC 306-995 small a?
And Mr. Chair, because
Ms.
I
Wilson.
seem to hear lack of objection to it, I did add window delivery to this provision. So you might want to discuss whether you one, want that, and 2, whether there's a vision about how that's going to work that needs to be incorporated.
I'll find out. Is there any concern, any questions from any other board member?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I noted that, and I'm fine with it.
Okay. Mr. Miller?
Just a clarification. Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
No, go ahead, Mr. Jaime.
Mr. Jaime, then.
Yes, sir. Just a clarification of what is a window delivery. Is that like a window of the retail shop or the window of a vehicle?
I was thinking the retail shop, but that's an excellent question. I just heard that some people might have windows that they can open to pass product through. And that was my recollection.
See, I'm in support of a window delivery if it's inside the retail shop. The whole curbside delivery, I'm against. I think I've expressed that numerous times. But thank you.
Okay. I understand if I might, there's two ways. I mean, one, the first thing I think about a window is like a drive-up coffee shop. But I know that Mr. Miller in his retail store had a window through which people passed their ID before they were allowed into the store. And what he had proposed, I believe, in an operating plan change was to check the ID, take the order, and actually pass the order through that same window so that an individual never went into the retail shop. So that's two different types of windows. And maybe Mr. Miller can tell me if I'm sort of interpreting that correctly.
That is the operational plan change that I did submit. I have a window inside the building. I do think that we need to put on the record what type of window we are saying is acceptable.
Yeah, I agree, because I think some retail stores, if they were to do a window like a drive-through coffee shop, I think that would be an expense for something that's pretty temporary. Change like Mr. Miller has done is something he can do, and it doesn't really require any physical change or construction or anything like that. So maybe the attorney could look at a window that's, you know, through the, I don't know how she could do that, but
I'm thinking exterior window of some kind, exterior to the premises.
Okay. Any suggestions beyond that from any board member? Okay. Any other comments on section A, small a? Okay. Then let's look at B, because B was substantially redone. And basically is the transportation. So the first thing for the attorney, given that we approved the advisory, does that change what we need to do or not need to do related to the small b?
You could remove both A and B since you've addressed those in the advisory, and solely address the issue of use of commercial carriers.
Okay. Any comments from board members?
Through the chair.
Mr. Miller.
I do think that we should remove A and B since it can be addressed with the advisory. I just don't find it necessary to send things up to the governor's office that, you know, aren't necessary.
Okay. Is there any objections from that from any other board member?
This is Jaime.
Yes, Mr. Jaime.
So the advisory that we just voted on, that is going to be, that's for our enforcement officers to send out to the licensees, but I still believe the governor's office should have some input on A and B in this regulation. We're changing things substantially, and I do believe this is a substantial change that, people should know about it. So thank you.
Okay. To the attorney then, could, when we develop whatever package we're going to send up to the governor's office, could we include a note that through an advisory to the industry that we are revising that we're doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, is that something we could do in a letter to the governor and not have it part of the regulation?
What I can do, and I can get it to you, is do a letter or request from the board that identifies the regulatory sections the board would like suspended, and in addition state, the board has issued these two advisories interpreting our current language of the regulation. Should you have any objection, please contact us. Something like that.
Okay. Mr. Jaime, would that be okay? I mean, yes.
Yes, sir. That would be okay. I just, like I said, I understand this affects a lot of stakeholders here, and I want to ensure that everything is in the open, not for any particular purpose, just besides, everybody needs to know what we're doing. And I think the more information we put out, the better. So thank you.
Okay.
That does work.
You bet. So if we, under B, we take out big A and big B, then C would become either A or part of B. And that's the one about the consignment of marijuana to a commercial carrier. Are there any questions or concerns related to that paragraph, which is on page 3, and it's the paragraph with the big C in parentheses?
And Mr. Chair, I took a stab at the definition of commercial carrier by looking at a couple other statutes. Just let me know if you think that reflects what you were foreseeing. And then my question for you is, were you also envisioning airline carriers? I wasn't clear from our last meeting.
I believe airline would be yes for cargo carriers, small carriers that might take things from Fairbanks to Nome or Fairbanks to Bethel or Anchorage to Bethel.
Cargo.
But so when you're looking at C, also look down at the bottom of that same page under F, the small f, that says for purposes of this section, commercial carrier means. So are there any questions on those two paragraphs for the attorney? Okay, Mr. Miller, does this satisfy your concerns and the issues you were raising?
It does.
Okay. Mr. Jaime, were you trying to get in and I over-talked you again?
No, sir.
Okay, Mr. Deshak?
So my question, the word carriers going, I think we were already touching on it, but we are implying all kinds of carriers, or is this limited number of carriers, like, couriers or trucking companies, etc.?
Ms. Wilson?
That's an excellent question, and I really need board guidance on. And I imagine you're not thinking of Joe's trucking service when Joe doesn't have a business or isn't incorporated and doesn't have a license and doesn't have insurance. But it's my lack of knowledge that, causes my questions about how you'd like to restrain this. And maybe Mr. Miller.
Well, so I think I know that the initial, the primary intent is going to be air carriers, but I could see the effectiveness of having some ground transportation included in here, but I would default to Mr. Miller maybe for some advice on that.
Well, I can tell you when I guess I was considering it. I was considering, small cargo air carriers. I hadn't given much thought to trucking, the road system. And I can't say that I've gotten any feedback from anyone in the industry that would consider, putting something on a courier from Fairbanks to Anchorage. So I'm not sure.
So if I understand from what you're saying is that currently we have persons that transport from Fairbanks to Kenai and they have a handler's card, and that's sort of what the handoff is for. That's sort of what the overnight stay is for. This is more for putting something on a carrier that would take it off the road system to Southeast Alaska, to rural Alaska, where this sort of marijuana handler takes it from cultivator A and delivers it to retail B in some other community. So if that's understanding, then maybe this needs to affect only air carrier. Is that what I'm sort of understanding, Mr. Miller?
Well, I will say there are currently transportation companies that travel the highway systems, and they deliver, and they are businesses. They all have marijuana handler cards. The thought I was using when I considered this was to keep people traveling by air into remote communities. That's where I was coming from when I discussed this. So,
okay.
I'm
Ms.
not
Wilson,
sure.
does that help?
It does. One question to add to that is, what about marine?
I'm not sure the ferry. I'm not sure the ferry system's still running, but yes, I would consider that off the road system for the marine highway.
So would it be
Mr. Chairman?
commercial air or marine carrier? And then marine.
So that would be like a barge line?
Yeah. I mean, marine travel is a lot longer than air travel, so I would say, consider the risk of that, of diversion, if you're approving that as well.
Yeah, because the marine highway would be one where somebody would take a package to Linden and want it to go from point A to point B, and Linden would put that in a mixed van with something that was headed to Sitka. Alaska Marine Lines would be one that would be shipping stuff from here to Seattle and back, and most of their stops in between aren't going south but are going north. So I don't know that the Marine would necessarily be the place. I think it would be mostly air in my mind.
I would think air is safer.
Mr. Chairman?
Very much so. Mr. Jaime, were you trying to get in?
Schulte, I had a question.
Oh, Mr. Schulte.
Yeah, so there are transporters who would move product from, say, Fairbanks to Anchorage. And I, if I'm not mistaken, I think some of them would also continue on to the Kenai, which could. So I'm wondering, are we leaving them out of consideration? The option of them traveling through Anchorage. And the reason I'm pausing here is I'm trying to figure out if our advisory covers that. Maybe it does, the earlier item that we discussed. I'm just trying to figure out if we're leaving some huge component of road transport out of the discussion. Perhaps Mr. Miller could enlighten me.
I guess in my mind, the way I see it, those transporters are already in business. They already have contracts. They already have marijuana handlers cards. So they would continue business as normal. They would not be affected by anything that we're doing here.
Okay.
I think we're more discussing that a marijuana business in Fairbanks could consign it to a ground transporter, courier, right? Someone who's in business, some trucking company, they could bring it to Anchorage, and it would be picked up by a marijuana handler card holder. Did I confuse you even worse?
No.
No, I think I'm clear now. Thanks. No other questions.
Okay. So I didn't hear any questions related to what was C.
I would like to,
we've given some brains. Who's that?
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Miller.
I would like to talk a little bit about the marine.
What's going on?
Transport down in Southeast. It's been a few years since I've been there, but I did a lot of construction projects and did a lot of other things. And I always remember transporting things from Ketchikan to Prince of Wales or other places by a small boat. It was a company, and that's what they did. And I would not like to take those guys off the table. You know, I know we talked about the big barge lines and we talked about the ferry system, but just like rural Alaska, there's lots of small rural air carriers, you know. Sometimes they have 2 or 3 planes. Same thing in the Southeast. There's small bulk companies or transport companies that run passengers and freight back and forth between some of the communities.
Okay.
So
there's some people having a background conversation. Could you please mute your phone?
Thank you. It was making it pretty tough there to talk.
It was. Ms. Wilson, do you have some guidance on that and something that you could sort of work on some wording?
Maybe I could talk offline with Mr. Miller and try to get some more parameters.
Sure.
I mean, what I think is if you want to identify smaller carriers like that, set some parameters about how formal these companies are. I just want to make sure they're reputable sources. And
right.
Yeah, and I mean,
Mr. Miller can help me with that.
I would hope that, you know, that no one would use anyone that didn't have a business license, wasn't registered in the state of Alaska, all those things, right? Yeah.
All right, I mean, you'll see another draft and you'll either like it or not. But
Okay.
we'll try to get Marine in there as well.
Okay, so any other questions then on what was old C, big C, and F? Okay, then little d, is there any questions on little d?
Yes.
On page 3.
I can make this much easier for you, Mr. Chair. Initial review is that this is just too broad of an authority, and if we're going to impose additional conditions, it should be the board doing it. So I think we delete this section, even though I have full trust in the director. That's the advice I was given within law.
Okay. Is there any objection to deleting small d? Hearing none. Then E is, I guess, the definition of curbside delivery. Are there any questions related to E? Mr. Deshak, were you trying to get in?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So any questions under E, the purpose of this section, curbside delivery means? And this might change a little bit when we dealt with the issue of window, but we'll leave that to the attorney. Okay, so hearing none, is there any questions on page 4F? Says 995 shall be effective for the length of time set out in 4462-260, which I believe is 120 days, or the length of the state of Alaska COVID-19 public health emergency declaration, whichever is less.
I have a comment on that too, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Wilson.
Basically, you know, these regulations are good for 120 days. The answer seems to be if we think we need a shorter time, then we do another emergency reg package to remove them. So I don't think F is necessary either. And while I'm at it, section G.
Through the chair, who said that I don't understand where that's coming from.
It's coming from the Department
As
of
far-
Law, which is the Administrative Procedure Act says emergency regulations are good for 120 days, and that we follow what the Emergency Procedure Act says. And that if the board wants to shorten that period of time, you know, if we get some idea that this emergency declaration is over, we can hold a very quick meeting and issue new emergency regulations to basically get rid of the old ones.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can put it by law again, but that was the initial interpretation I received. I think the sentiment it is very good, which is why extend regulations beyond the public health emergency. I just don't think this is the vehicle for doing it.
Okay, does that answer your question, Mr. Hyman?
Through the chair, so Ms. Wilson, it's your belief that it's not necessary, or it's Department of Law's belief?
In discussion with the law and regulations section, the discussion was this creates too much ambiguity and goes contrary to the statute. So it's not just me alone. I'm happy to take that question back to them, though, if that would.
You know, if you would, I would appreciate that, just because I think once these are emergency regulations, and once the public health emergency is over, the time, these should be over. So,
I hear you completely. I just want to give you the right vehicle for doing that. And if we can do it through this section, I'll talk to more people. But it really is well, the statute says they're good 120 days. Why are we using a regulation to contradict the statute? So I'll find out what I can, sir.
I appreciate it, Ms. Wilson. Thank you very much.
Okay, so any other questions overall about the 306-995?
And Mr. Chair, for Section F, or Section G, I'm basically going to be moving that up and saying here are the licenses that are impacted by these regulation changes, and referencing their particular regulatory and statutory source and/or statutory.
Okay.
So G will be gone, but incorporated in A.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so we now have given instructions to the attorney for revisions of the finding of emergency for the advisory on transportation and for the emergency regulations. My understanding is what the attorney will bring back to us at a meeting yet to be determined would be what would be transmitted to the governor, the revised finding of emergency, the revised regulations, and the advisory notices. We would take one more look at that before that would be transmitted to the governor. Is that correct, Ms. Wilson?
It is. Thank you.
Okay. So therefore, we need to look at another meeting, just what everybody is really chomping at the bit to do.
And Mr.
Yes, Ms. Wilson.
You can simply continue this meeting to the time that you identify, and we'll put the public notice up, but you don't have to call a new meeting.
Okay. So, just to give the attorney time, it says she's going to be tied up today. Is there a particular time on Friday that board members are comfortable with, hopefully just a quick half-hour to 45-minute meeting, if it's just reviewing documents that we've already seen, but we could schedule it at a time to start, and we'll just see how long it goes. In particular, for me, I can meet anytime after 11 o'clock on Friday.
I'm available all day.
This is Chaim. I'm available from 11 to 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and then I'm busy.
Okay.
It's Mr. Miller. I'm available all day.
Okay. Mr. Deshuk?
I'll be available.
Okay. So let's continue this meeting then to 11 o'clock on Friday the 17th at 11 a.m. since I'll have time to cook my wife's birthday dinner, I don't have to worry about feeding her lunch, so,
Very
she can
good.
eat leftovers.
Happy birthday, sir.
Yeah. So,
Chair?
okay, so, we have,
Chair?
who,
May I interrupt you for a second? This is Melissa Walter, the admin officer at the AMCO office.
oh, hi, Melissa, yeah.
Hi, how are you? I just have a quick question. I know you guys had passed a motion to extend their handler permit for 1 year, and I'm just wondering if that needs to be listed out there in one of these regulations or anything that, that needs to be changed because, under 306-700, it's specific about that they're only good for 3 years from the course completion, and I don't want to go through and change all these records if, we still need to do some steps to get there.
Good question. Ms. Wilson.
I will give you my answer. I don't know yet. I'll find out.
Can you add that to your agenda to bring back to us on Friday?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Walters. I knew we did that, and I wasn't really thinking, but that, with the advisory, that is another information that we could provide to the governor.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's basically the review of the motions prepared by the attorney. And it is time. I will open it up briefly. If there's anybody that would like to provide public testimony on any issues not on this agenda or not proposed regulations. Is there anybody out there that would like to have any public comment to the board? Okay, I am not hearing any. So we will reconvene this meeting to 11 o'clock on Friday, April 17th, at which time we will review the revisions that the attorney is going to make based on our conversation, our meeting today. Is there anything else that needs to come before the board before we recess until Friday? Okay, well, thank you all, and we will talk to you again on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Bye.
The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end.